Welcome to Take Back the Night 2006. We want to thank all of you for coming out tonight, especially in this weather. My name is Ingrid Rasmussen. I'm the volunteer coordinator of the UM Women's Center. This is Tegan Maynard-Hahn. She's our office coordinator. And this is Bonnie Gale, our outreach coordinator. Take Back the Night is an opportunity for survivors of domestic abuse, sexual assault, and rape to have one safe night each year to speak out, rally, march to the streets, and reclaim the night. This year, our theme is Voices Against Violence. We want to encourage everyone in the community to break the silence surrounding these issues and make their voices heard. Many survivors of relationship violence are forced to live in silence because they do not have the level of security or resources necessary to report physical or sexual aggression. Only 16% of all sexual assaults are reported to the police. Among women raped by intimate partners, the reporting level drops to 7.5%. Tonight will be our chance to raise our voices and let Missoula know that we want our streets safe.
All right, we want to acknowledge all those who have contributed to this event to help make it possible. First of all, we want to thank SARC for being here, the YWCA, Lambda, and the Pan-Hellenic Council. Please also take note of our thank you sign up here of all the businesses that have contributed to Take Back the Night this year. Do please support these businesses who have so generously donated to us this year. And we also want to thank, of course, our dedicated volunteers for helping to make this possible. Let's give them a hand, please. Also, please note that circulating throughout the crowd, there will be SARC volunteers around. If anybody at any time needs to talk to somebody, they'll be wearing yellow armbands. And they also have provided a safe tent if anybody needs a place to just have some quiet time, relax, reflect. The tent is located over by the flagpole over here if you just need to take a break. We also this year want to recognize that this is an important election season, and one of the ways that we can raise our voices against violence is to vote. So we can contribute to making our community safer by supporting policymakers who want to help end violence in our communities. There are many voices here tonight with a unified desire to help make Missoula community safer for everybody. So please, let's keep this momentum going and let's take it to the polls. Lastly, while you're at the rally, visit our armband table. We have blue armbands for supporters and purple armbands for survivors.
Our first speaker, Judge Karen A. Orzak, has received her BS and PhD at Arizona State University. Judge Orzak has been the Justice of the Peace for Missoula County for Department 2 since 1999. She is the MMA training judge for Western Montana, a member of the Supreme Court Commission on Technology, as well as the Commission on Judicial Ethics. She is also the Vice President of the Missoula Kiwanis Club. Formerly, Judge Orzak served as a crime victims advocate for Missoula City and County, and as the volunteer and night coordinator for the YWCA's Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault program here in Missoula. Please join us in welcoming Judge Orzak.
Thank you for having me here tonight. I first spoke at Take Back the Night on October 15th, 2004. I'm both pleased and honored to be with you again to speak at this most important community event. On that night 2 years ago, I ended with 4 suggestions: listen, learn, hope, and educate. And as I come to you tonight, I want to inform you that to build a better and more effective response to violence, you must build a healthy community. Building a better community includes community involvement with the justice system. And I would propose changing the name to this rally to Take Back the Day. 2 years ago, I asked the county to explore the possibility of establishing a specialized court, a family court, or a domestic violence court that would handle criminal cases and orders of protection. Missoula County received a grant, and for 2 years, we've been actively discussing this possibility. Along the way, the discussion expanded from a court to actually examining how our integrated justice system responds to violent crime. Police officers, detention officers, judges, clerks, grant writers, crime victim advocates, victims, probation officers, prosecutors, and defense attorneys have been talking for the past 2 years on how to make a better system to respond to our violence in this community. The goal is to stop the violence. The questions boil down to two. How do we keep victims safe? And how do we hold offenders accountable? We, the task force, have traveled from one end of the country to the other in the past year and a half and have looked at how other jurisdictions handle violent crime. We have listened and learned a whole lot from other counties. And actually, we're doing a pretty good job here in Missoula County, but we can do better. It's time to take back the day. In the last 3 weeks, and ending this Monday night, I've been attending an informational series at St. Patrick Hospital. It's about addiction, it's about mental health, violence, and poverty. For the past 8 years as a judge, I see every day, day in and day out, how one or more of these issues plague both victims and offenders. Sometimes I wonder if our violence, our addictions, our illnesses, physical, mental, or emotional, are not the result of unresolved trauma in our lives, whether we're victims or offenders. Maybe as a child or as an adult, we were raped, or we were abandoned, or locked in our rooms, or humiliated by those who said they loved us, or beaten, or maybe we were told we were stupid, or we were told we were never going to amount to anything. We were hurt, and we're still hurting. How do we get better? That's what we're here for. We get better by building better community. We get better by being individually involved in building better community. We want to take back the day. The ways that we've done this in the county is that the county has expanded from 1998 from one crime victim advocate to many. We help victims get through the criminal justice system. Justice can be slow. Cases wind their way slowly through the system, and any victim who needs support can go to a crime victim advocate. Another positive way we build community is through community service. And this service is supervised by volunteers in our community, especially at Fort Missoula, that allows offenders to contribute something positive to the community. The TP burner at the fort was constructed with community service by community service workers, offenders that have been sentenced through the justice courts. In fact, much of the new construction at the Historical Museum is done by community service workers. There's a community circles program. It's a program in the justice system to help people connect to services available in the community. And it helps to build a healthy community by building a healthy community around offenders, as well as victims. The idea is to end violence in our community, whether physical violence or the violence of addiction or poverty. The goal is to get people out of the justice system and into positive community relationships. We need more volunteers. The Alternative Court Program is a program available at every level of court in Missoula County, at municipal court level, justice court level, and district court level. It is an active supervision program through probation and the court and a caseworker to hold offender accountable. The offender involved has a diagnosed mental illness, and it's not unusual for an offender to also have chemical dependency issues. The offender reports to the court each month and has a specific task to complete in the community. A judge This judge in Justice Court monitors their progress because this has been shown to be the best practice to lead to a positive outcome for both the offender, the victim, and our community. With all these tools, we build healthy individuals, we build healthy community, and along the way, you know what? We're all going to get better and better. So it's time to take back the day. Go forward and march.
Thank you so much, Judge Orzik. That's amazing. I love hearing messages like that. This year we have an amazing opportunity to bring a man into the conversation of stopping relationship violence in our community. Brad Boylan has been working with Patty Street Counseling and the Men Against Violence program for the past 4 years. This is a program that teaches responsibility and makes the aggressors hold themselves accountable. I'd really like to have you welcome Brad Boylan. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I'm used to talking with batters, so I may cuss every once in a while. I hope I don't offend anybody. I want to clarify a few things about batters treatment. It's not anger management. This is not about managing your anger. Most batters can conduct themselves quite well in public and around other people. It's just in the homes that it becomes an issue. So it's not about anger management. It's also not about drug addiction. There are plenty of addicts and alcoholics that don't go home and control and dominate and abuse their families. So I wanted to clarify that. The bottom line is a tiger is a tiger is a tiger, whether they're sober, drunk, or going to AA. So we need to keep that in mind and not provide any excuses for their behavior. The real issue is about power and control in its least destructive form, all the way down the continuum or up the continuum to domination and terror. That's what we're dealing with. It's a mindset of domination, terror, and the use of power and control to get their needs met. I was thinking when I was preparing for this that next year we're going to be celebrating 20 years in the state of Montana where the rule of thumb was thrown out and it became against the law in Montana to hit your wife. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking 20 years ago, I was a junior in high school. It's not that long ago because I'm not that old. And that's kind of shocking to me that it was just so recently that it became against the law to hit your wife or your partner. On the flip side of that, we've been at this for 20 years and we've made a lot of progress in bringing about change, but I think we still have a lot of work to go, a lot of work to do in this. When I spoke to Bonnie Gale about it, she mentioned to me the theme was being proactive. And so I thought about that. What does proactive mean in regarding treating offenders and domestic violence? So keep it in mind, I'm coming at this from a treatment perspective. We can teach them to recognize their patterns of behavior. We can teach them to be more self-aware and provide them with alternative responses to their behaviors. We can teach them that their belief systems are horribly distorted. We can teach them different beliefs. We can teach them that they, and not their wives, spouses, or my old lady, is responsible for their abusive behavior. We can teach them about accountability. We can teach them that psychological and emotional abuse is often more damaging than physical abuse. We can even teach them why they are the way they are. We can and we do teach all of these things, but these things are not about being proactive to domestic violence. These are about damage control, because these individuals with whom I work and my partner works have already done damage. They've already been abusive. They've already hurt and destroyed a lot of people because of their behaviors. You see, to be proactive, I believe that we need to look further or deeper into the roots of domestic violence. We need to address the origins of the beast, and we need to stop its growth. We need to free the remaining hostages of domestic violence that were not freed 20 years ago when the law changed, nor even more recently when it became partner-family member assault, where it requires reasonable apprehension of harm and no physical violence at all. To be proactive with domestic violence, we need to free our children. Our children, the children of our community and our society, are our responsibility. They are the next generation. They can be the next generation of batterers, or they can be the next generation of healthy men and safer women. This is not about taking back the night anymore, to kind of follow Judge Orzech's line. It's not about taking back the night anymore. This is about taking back the morning when dad wakes up and doesn't get his cup of coffee. This is about taking back the afternoon when he gets home from work and dinner isn't ready or the kids may have misbehaved that day. This is about taking back the nursery because mom is prevented from nurturing her crying child. This is about taking back the home where it should be every child's right to safety, security, and love. We all know about the outcomes of domestic violence and the effects on young boys, young girls that grow up in that environment. Girls from domestic violence homes grow up and are at higher risk for entering into domestic violence relationships. Boys from domestic violence homes are at higher risk to grow up and become perpetrators. In reality, we also know that not all people who experience these things grow up to be perpetrators. But I can tell you this, after 12 years of working with perpetrators and batterers, that all of them have been traumatized. And in saying that, I don't offer that as an excuse to their behavior, but an understanding and an explanation as to why they do the things they do, which brings back to me the emphasis, the importance on addressing the children that are affected in these homes by the domestic violence. Fathers represent to young girls the first love in their life, good, bad, or ugly. What love looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like, what they can expect from their partner, and what their role is in a relationship, what their value is, and what their self-worth is. Fathers represent to young boys a model for manhood, good, bad, or ugly. What love looks like, feels like, and sounds like. What they can expect from their partner, and what their role is in a relationship. What their value is, and what their self-worth is. I recently asked myself, in doing group, why is it that nearly 95% of the men in our program have children, many of whom were present at home during the instances of their violence? And I asked myself, why is it that only a very small percentage of them are being held accountable for the domestic violence and trauma that they've inflicted upon their children? Remember, this isn't just about being physically abused anymore. The emotional and psychological trauma experienced by children is catastrophic to their emotional and physical health, as well as their academic and social lives and their futures. Only a small portion are being held accountable for creating the next generation of distorted beliefs, abusiveness, and traumatic relationships. This needs to be addressed. This is where proactive solutions to domestic violence lie. In the home, at the dinner table, in the nursery, with our children. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. I'd now like to introduce Jody Rave. Jody Rave is a national columnist and reporter for Lee Enterprisers, and she works from the Missoula newsroom. She has one of the country's only news beats devoted to Native issues. She moved to Montana in 2004 after completing the Nyman Fellowship for Journalism at Harvard University. Jody graduated from the University of Colorado's journalism program in Boulder. She has received top writing honors from the military, mainstream, and Native news organizations. Most recently, her work has been published in The Best Reporting on Race and Ethnicity, The Authentic Voice of Multicultural America. We asked Jody to be here today to talk about her own research concerning relationship violence in Native communities. So please help me welcome Jody Rave.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Women's Center for inviting me to be here with you tonight. And I want all of you to give yourself a round of applause for being here on a cold, wet, rainy night, because you're gonna be the ones that make your community healthy communities. I want to begin by saying Deshana Deskasha. That's in my Hidatsa language, and that's my greeting to all the men and all the women that are here tonight. I was invited here because I just finished, I just wrote a series on domestic violence for all the lead newspapers. Probably a total of 15 stories. Most of them have appeared in the Missoulian so far. We've still got 2 left. One we have to get past a lawyer, and that story is about the young woman on one of the silhouettes over there, Josie Sellaway, who was beaten, fighting with her boyfriend the night she died, but all the charges were dropped against him because the coroner said there wasn't enough evidence to prove she died during the fight. So hopefully we'll get that story in the paper here within the next week. A lot of the stories I wrote, I picked up the phone and I probably called more than 500 people, some of them 1 time, some of them 10 times, to really get this story about domestic violence going on. I focused on Native American women. Now, there's good stories in there, there's stories of despair, there's stories of statistics. I kind of just want to go over one of them with you. It was a story about Leona Kiddo, a Lakota woman from South Dakota in the Flandreau Reservation. I want to offer that story because it's a story of domestic violence, but it also, I think, is one of hope. Leona grew up in on the Flandreau Reservation and the Sisseton reservations in South Dakota. It wasn't a happy childhood for her. She was in and out of what she calls the Papoose house. It was an orphanage for Indian children. When she wasn't at the Papoose house, and I'm using her language, she was with relatives, and she was sexually abused by uncles and cousins, and they told her to be good or else they were going to send her back to the Papoose house. When she wasn't in that situation, she was living with her mother in old cars in the woods, and they had that kind of lifestyle until one day social services came and took all her brothers and sisters away, and she lived that lifestyle all growing up. And her violence didn't end then. She married at the age of 21 and began another decade or so of abuse at the hands of her husband. When her husband finally died, she said, I didn't have anything to do but to go out and to get drunk, she said. And Leona spent the next 11 years of her life drinking. And during that time, she met a man that she eventually married, and they drank together. And as all of you are aware, the drugs and alcohol often accompany situations of domestic violence. Now, Leona and Norman could have very well continued this lifestyle of drinking, but and this is where the hope comes in. And I think that everybody who's in a bad situation, there's a way to get out. Leona and Norman's story is one in falling back on Native spirituality, and that story starts with a relative coming to their house, and he wanted to borrow money, and so he gave Norman a pipe stem, or the bowl that is used in traditional ceremonies. They fill it with tobacco and they pray with it. But he only gave him half of it. He gave him the bowl. And Norman gave him some money, and his relative said, I'll get the bowl back when I'm able to pay you. Well, he eventually came back, and he had some money to give back to Norman. But what he said is, like, Norman, I want you to go ahead and keep that bowl, that ceremonial bowl. But that bowl didn't work without the stem, and Norman talked to a medicine man uncle of his in Nebraska, and his uncle told him, if you get the stem for that pipe, he said, I'll bring that pipe to life for you. And so Norman went out on his quest, and he did find the other half of the stem to go with that bowl. And his uncle said, come back then, and we'll have a ceremony. So the night before they went back, Norman and Leona went out and they partied again, and they got drunk, and then they went and saw the uncle medicine man, who took them into a sweat lodge ceremony, and that entirely changed the course of their life. They did that ceremony, and from that day forward, Leona and Norman didn't drink again. But that hurt and that abuse that Leona experienced as a child and as a woman in an abusive marriage, she's still dealing with those feelings of despair that don't leave her. And she's in a situation where she now works at a boarding school, and a lot of those young women come from abusive relationships. And so she talks with them, and they cry together. Norman, excuse me, the couple still continues that spirituality and that road to healing. It's been 14 years now. They still go to fasting ceremonies and sun dances. And Norman can tell that, you know, that pain doesn't go away, and he sees it there in Leona's eyes sometimes. And you know, he asks her if she's got that hurt feeling, and she'll cry and she'll say yes. And you know, they'll sit down and they'll talk about it. And I think that's really one of the answers I found throughout all of my reporting, is that the answers might lie in the legal system, you know, to prosecute offenders and that, but I think the real answer is in caring for one another and showing that compassion for your mate or somebody else that you know who's in a bad situation and needs to heal. And as I as I mentioned earlier, I picked up the phone about 500 times, and I talked to people all over the country. When I started writing these stories of domestic violence, I wasn't sure how I was going to tell them. And when I was writing the series, I often thought, boy, this would have been a lot easier to not write about domestic violence and sexual assault and stalking and rape and all the abuses that go with that. It would have been probably a lot easier to write about economic development or something like that, something less emotional. But these stories need to be told. I try to write stories that offered hope and inspired healing. And I wrote stories that didn't offer any excuses, but rather exposed a day in the life of the abuser and the abused. I wrote stories to let victims know there are legions of concerned people out there working to end violence against women. The good news around the country is that domestic violence has dropped 59% in the last decade. Unfortunately, for Native women, for Indian women, domestic violence is on the rise, and there's a number of different reasons that people offer to explain that, but it just shows that the importance of creating awareness and how a lot of our communities still need help, and they still need to heal. When I offered the story, or when I wrote my stories, it wasn't to offer a panacea for domestic violence, but simply to create awareness, like everybody here is doing tonight. I want to thank everyone who's trying to do the same thing to create that awareness. So I encourage you to keep telling your stories, keep standing tall, keep being strong, and keep working to end violence. Thank you.
you so much, Ms. Rafe. I've been calling all of these speakers bordering on stalking and saying, please come and speak. We have a very diverse, very ecological model to work from. We have people who work in proactiveness. We have people who are making the laws and setting the standards by which the rest of us can learn. When I look out, I see a lot of young people, and I know that we are the leaders of tomorrow because of what we're doing tonight. In that theme, we have Karen Townsend. She is the Chief Deputy County Attorney from the Missoula County Attorney's Office, Special Assistant United States Attorney. She went to Ohio Wesley University, University of California, and University of Montana School of Law. She has many, many accomplishments to her name, extensive local trial advocacy teaching experience, and right now she's a candidate for district court judge in the November 7th election. Just letting you all know. She's done many community activities, Big Brothers and Sisters, the Capital Campaign Committee, Kiwanis Club. And most importantly, when I was speaking to her, her enthusiasm for changing the laws by which we've been working. Brad earlier spoke about how 20 years ago we got rid of the rule of thumb, and Karen has a lot to speak about how not too long ago rape was really hard to prove and in fact sometimes impossible. So we'd like to thank these people for the change that they've made, and let's welcome Karen Townsend. Thank you.
I too would like to thank the Women's Center for sponsoring this event and for asking me to speak. As I thought about what I might say tonight, I thought back to when I was hired as a deputy county attorney for the Missoula County Attorney's Office. That was in 1976, 30 years ago. And my initial responsibilities were on the civil side of the office, but the other thing that I was asked to do was to assist in criminal prosecutions when women and children were victims of a crime. The males in the office would charge the crimes, but they wanted help in talking to these young women, to these children, or these adult rape victims. And that's where I came in. When these cases went to trial, I was the one that would sit at counsel table with them. I would help prepare the victims for trial, and I would usually be the one who conducted the direct examination of the victim. We were very pleased that we were relatively successful in our prosecutions. When the opportunity arose for me to move over to the criminal division, I asked if I could go there, and that's where I've been ever since. I thought that a woman could make a difference in the system when we looked at women and children who were victims, and I think that that is true. I have made it an active part of my career to help in the training of police officers so they could be more sensitive, to help crime victims advocates understand what the laws were and how they could help us. And I've also worked to lobby to change the law. Brad talked about how we brought a new law in and got rid of the law of the rule of thumb. We also, when I first started prosecuting rape cases, there was an instruction that was given almost every time when the case went to the jury. And that instruction was, rape is an easy crime to claim and difficult to disprove. And it basically automatically asked the jury to call into question the credibility of the victim there. Prosecutors across this country took a stand to say that was a bad instruction. It was something that was authored back in the 1600s and somehow still was in our law in the 1970s. Fortunately, we found the case to take to the Supreme Court and get it outlawed in Montana. We've come a long way since the 1970s when I started, but we still have a long way to go. And part of the way we're trying to help in these kinds of cases is that domestic violence task force that Judge Orszag talked about and that I was also a part of. We need to find new strategies to make it easier for people to come forward and to be able to tell their story and have themselves believed. The fact that we can do evidence-based prosecution is wonderful. The fact that we can use 911 tapes without even the victim having to testify is another way that we can proceed. I've been proud to be part of that kind of a revolution in helping make the laws and arguing those cases at the Supreme Court so that they can be the law of the land. I also know that it is courage of the women who are victims that makes the biggest difference. I am truly overwhelmed when I meet with women who have been victims to see how much they've gone through, but how they are willing to stand up and say, I want to tell somebody what happened to me. And then it's my job to make that as easy as possible for them. Clearly, I can never demonstrate as much courage as they have, or the help from groups like advocates and the Women's Center who have put this event on. So I thank you very much for coming out tonight. I encourage you to take an active part in your future and in helping us continue to make progress so that we can take back the night, take back the day, take back the morning, take back the home, and allow people to live effective and productive lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Townsend. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for informing us as to what Missoula has done to stop relationship violence. It's amazing to see this. This is my third year listening to these speakers, and truly inspiring every single year. Thank you for coming despite the weather. It takes a special type of person to handle Montana weather. And tonight we are all Montanans united against violence and cold. Violence comes in many different forms. As we demonstrate our commitment to end relationship violence, let us not forget the violence that affects our Montana families. Montana families that have just lost a loved one in a war overseas. Let us not let groups from other states come to our state and preach hate while our Montana families mourn their losses. Raise your voice tonight against violence. Raise your voice tonight against violence against our fallen Montanans. Raise your voice tonight against protests held at funerals to try and dishonor Montanans. Raise your voice against violence overseas. Raise your voice tonight against those who attempt to deprive us of our rights. Raise your voice tonight against violence in schools for the children of our country and for the children of Montana. Raise your voice tonight against violence in our homes and in our streets. Raise your voices against violence, period. Take this enthusiasm to the streets and take back your night. Nicola, I hand it over to you. Thank you.